You better not take me. You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we?
We're going.
No, we're not.
Yes.
Then where the f*** these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Keep It Real is a weekly podcast where we present our theories of the subjects we cover based on our interest and research. Some material may be graphic and disturbing, so proceed with caution.
Hey guys, it's Ashley. I am here by myself today. Shai is out of town and I just couldn't wait to get started on the new season, so here I am by myself. Hopefully I can provide you with as much entertainment as usual, but let's just get started because I have nobody to BS with right now. So a topic that is not widely known or discussed, but has been a long-standing and constant problem within the U.S. and Canada to this day, is the disappearance and murders of thousands of Indigenous women. Many of these women go missing or murdered without media attention, without being put into a missing persons database, and most have not received the justice they or their families deserve. Within the Canadian female population, only 4% of that population is comprised of Indigenous women, yet they make up 16% of homicides in the country and 11% of missing persons cases between 1980 and 2012. That's pretty ridiculous. This is over 300 women who go missing or are murdered under suspicious circumstances every single year. If that does not horrify you, go ahead and turn this podcast off and throw your phone in the bathtub because I don't want you listening to my podcast. Indigenous women are 5 times more likely to be the victims of violent crime than anyone else. And, you know, in our last episode, we talked about touched on what in Canada were known as starlight tours, where police would pick up Indigenous men, oftentimes who were inebriated, and would take them out into the middle of nowhere and leave them to fend for themselves and either die or get back to society somehow. So this is like a really prevalent topic, and I'm not trying to pinpoint only Canada. Today we are talking about a case that took place in Canada, a couple cases that took place in Canada. And so, I mean, this happens in the United States as well, but it's a really huge problem. And anyway, okay, well, I mean, this is something that I've been wanting to cover. We've both been wanting to cover for a really long time. I kind of put it off for a while because I know it's going to take an emotional toll on me to be looking at all these cases and hearing so much horrible information. So I think what we're going to do this year is that we're going to make it our goal to cover at least 2 of these cases each month. Doing that for 12 months isn't even going to be able to scratch the surface of the horror that is taking place among the Indigenous communities of the United States and Canada. But we're going to do all we can to shine a light on this and hopefully bring attention to these women's lives, disappearances, and their deaths. And this is something that is, not happening at quite the prevalency I would hope it would be at this point, though they are definitely doing better. There's a lot of organizations that are starting to bring light to this issue, and I have applied to get access to a database that a woman who was getting her PhD actually created for the missing Indigenous women because there was not one. So anyway, I'm hoping to be able to talk to her at some point, and anyway, we'll be covered. So you'll be hearing about this once a month probably because I think that it's going to be a nice way to be able to cover all of the insane amount of cases that there are, but do it in a way that I remain somewhat sane, and we're both not just wallowing in depression all the time. So the first woman that we are going to discuss in this series that we're going to do is Amber Tuccaro, who was murdered by a possible serial killer in the Edmonton area in Canada, where there are over 15 Indigenous women who have gone missing in recent years. Amber Alyssa Tuccaro was a 20-year-old woman from the Miksew Cree First Nations tribe in Alberta, Canada. Amber had been adopted by her parents when she was 3 days old when she joined her new family of 4 brothers, her mother, and her father. According to her oldest brother, Paul, their mother had 4 biological boys and had always wanted a girl, and one day they had received a call that there was a baby girl available for adoption within their own family, and they didn't hesitate before driving hours and hours to pick her up, and they brought her to join their family. She grew up in Fort Chip with them, within the Miksew Cree tribe, and was the baby of the family until her parents divorced. And it was at this point her mother and her father both had moved away briefly from Fort Chip, and she was cared for in great part by her older brother Paul, who was 17 at the time, and her other brothers, until her mother moved back to Fort Chip. Now, this is according to Paul in a testimony that he was giving at a hearing with, I think, some tribal elders that I had found online, and the transcript was available. So this is how he had explained her childhood. So she had lived with her brother and his family for some time, and what they recall from those times was that she had an overwhelming sense of love for everyone, that she was really loving with his children, that she had a passion for music, and she enjoyed sharing and playing music with her nieces and her nephews. He said that they would jam out and have like a great time just laughing and playing music together, and she was absolutely adored by her nieces and her nephews, and had created a strong bond with the older ones that she had lived with. She had a witty sense of humor, and she was known to be a tough lady that didn't take shit. So at the time of her disappearance, Amber and her 14-month-old son were living with her mother, and also going back and forth. There was a home that for single mothers that in Canada up there where I don't know if it was within her community or if it's a whole Canada thing, but where they try to help women who are single mothers with financial situations and living situations. And so you had to live in this house in order to be able to receive some assistance. And so she had been kind of going back and forth between that place and her mother's house. But one day she told her mother that she was going to go to Edmonton for a few days with her 14-month-old son, Jacob, and a friend who, according to her mother and her brother, that she had just met. Okay, so they flew to Edmonton from Fort McMurray, where they lived. Edmonton, for anyone that doesn't know, is Alberta's capital province, and this is somewhere where they were going for the police say a brief getaway. They have also said that she was going to meet a friend. Her family, and I will get into it in a little while, but her family isn't exactly clear on what she was there for. So that I found really interesting when I was doing really like digging into the research there, because it's said over and over anytime you read that she was going to meet a friend, she was with a friend, and that, you know, it's no big deal the way that she left her young son with this friend because they were friends. But in my research, I found that her family claims that's not the case, that this lady wasn't someone that she was real comfortable with because she only had just met her. I mean, maybe they were comfortable with each other, but she had just met her, and they all found it to be extremely out of character that Amber left her young son, who they said was the joy of her life, to stay with a woman who she barely knew. And so that made it especially troubling whenever she went missing. Anyway, so we'll get into that. So the reason for them traveling there is up for dispute at this point. On August 17th, 2010, the two women checked into the Miskew Hotel in Miskew, Alberta, which is a small city just outside the city of Edmonton. The police claim, the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, claim that presumably they stay there because it was more affordable than staying within the city limits of Edmonton. To the locals, Miskew is considered an industrial business park with little to no residences. It has the airport, it's flush with hotels, warehouses, there are a few car dealerships and other businesses that cater to the oil and gas industry, and restaurants like that, stuff like that. So very few people actually live within the city of Nisku. It's just more of like filled with hotels and all sorts of other little things. I mean, I think we've all been to cities that are essentially an industrial area, or at least parts of the city. So like I said, this is also home to the international airport, which is full of flights of oil workers to Alberta. The city has a very transient population, so nobody is really permanent residents here in this exact city of Nisku. So that evening, sometime between 7:30 and 8 p.m., Amber decided to leave Jacob with her son, with her friend, and according to the RCMP, she left to meet a friend in Edmonton. Like I said, we'll get into it more, but that's not exactly clear either. She ended up hitching a ride to the city with an unknown man and was never seen alive again. So Amber's mother, Tootsie, is her nickname, and I wrote that. It's Vivian. I'll call her Tootsie, though, because that's what she calls herself. So she said that she had been texting with her daughter the whole duration of her trip until the evening of August 18th. And that's when she says her text with her daughter completely stopped. So it was at this point that Tootsie called Amber's friend who she had left to go to Edmonton with. And according to Tootsie and her brother Paul, Amber's brother Paul, her friend stated that Amber had left, and then her story began to start changing. So we all know what that means, in my opinion. I was kind of shocked whenever I heard this account of this from his mother and his brother, because I didn't read that in news stories. They all acted like this was her friend, that she had nothing to do with it at all. The more I read, I start to wonder, what in the hell was up with this lady? What's going on here? So anyway, at this point also, obviously, her mother began to suspect that something was terribly wrong, because Amber's friend's story just continued to change regarding where she had gone and when she left and why she had gone there. Because she left her son. So I am like super suspicious of this friend now. I did not realize this, and I really don't remember hearing this before, and maybe I just overlooked it. But, from their mouth, the mother of Amber and the brother of Amber both state that this friend could not keep her story straight from the get-go, which there's like kind of two ways that could go, in my opinion. Maybe there's more that I'm not considering. One is that she's trying to hide something. What was it? I don't know. Maybe something to protect Amber, like if she was going out to do something that might be illegal or her family might not be pleased with her doing. Or is it because her friend did something herself that, is super suspicious and possibly has something to do with why she was kidnapped or abducted and then murdered. So her family claims that it was really unlike her to leave Jacob and to not be in contact with them. She knew that they all knew deep down that something was wrong. Then they contacted the RCMP, who completely, as we have seen so many times before, completely brushed off her concerns. They told her that Amber was likely out drinking and partying and that she would show up eventually, which is insulting as hell. And I'm telling you, if I fucking hear this one more time, I will throw up. Like, truly, what is the deal with this? I don't know. I have to think that it has something to do with the fact that she was an Indigenous woman, because that is definitely something that makes people, apparently in law enforcement, not take these cases as seriously. They have a stereotype in mind. Obviously, they said straight up to her mother, she's probably out drinking and partying. I find that to be just truly the most infuriating part of half the stories that we talk about, is that the police act like these people are just, even though they're their own mother, who should know if something is wrong, and like this disappearance means that something more serious than she's just out partying. They get blown off by people telling them. They apparently told her she had to wait 24 hours to be able to file a missing persons report. That old trope that's not even true. So anyway, I'm not here to just right off the bat start maligning the police department, or the RCMP, but at the same time, they really screwed up here big time, and they admit it sort of later on. But I mean, they play a part in why this has not been solved to this point, I believe. So, like I already ranted on, but we know that adults have the right to leave their lives, but how many times do we have to see this laissez-faire attitude from law enforcement? And it backfires all the time with terrible outcomes, so it's just kind of infuriating. So I know it's a fine line. I obviously know that there is a fine line between wasting resources on someone who has willingly gone missing versus an adult that has encountered dangerous circumstances. But like I just said, when a family member expresses extreme concern, they state this is behavior that's out of the norm and, it's something that they believe is troubling they're concerned with. I really just think that more times than not, you're going to end up not wasting your resources because this is a serious matter. So, it's just pretty infuriating as we go along here. So Tootsie contacted the RCMP and they blew her off. So after Tootsie contacted the RCMP and she unsuccessfully got them to look into Amber's disappearance, the friend that she had flown to Edmonton with called her and told her she was taking Jacob to Child Protective Services in Edmonton, which I was like, what? That's another really strange aspect of the story. Like, if I went on a little mini vacation with my friend who had a child, she left him with me one night to go do whatever it is, and meet a friend or whatever, and she ended up not showing back up ever, I don't think my first inclination would be to take the child to Child Protective Services. I just think that's really strange. She called her own mother, who she was living with at the time, mind you, and said that she was taking the kid there. Why did she not just say, I'm gonna wait for you to come pick him up or whatever? It's just, that's fishy as well. So there's just a few really suspect actions on this quote unquote friend who she went to stay with went to Edmonton with for those few days. At this point, Tootsie then traveled to Edmonton to retrieve Jacob, and she had to go through a bunch of rigmarole in a court process, and it took about a month or so to gain custody of him, where he was living with strangers in a foster home. So I just really don't understand why her friend would have done that at all, unless she just sucks. Maybe she does just suck. I don't know. So members of the group Stolen Sisters and Brothers Awareness Movement, they put up posters near Leduc County, which is the county she was in, hoping to get answers in the growing number of cases of missing and murdered Aboriginal women. And they were really the only ones to do anything about it at this point, unfortunately. So on September 4th, this is about a month later, it's not quite a month, okay, so it's a few weeks following Amber's disappearance, the RCMP made a public statement that they did not believe Amber to be in any danger, and they knew she was in the Edmonton area. This is based off of some rando guy saying he saw her at a gas station. I'm kind of appalled that they would release a public statement saying that, but okay, we'll continue. Without her family having seen her or the RCMP having any contact with her, and with her family continuing to state she was missing, they removed her from the missing person. The RCMP removed her from the missing persons list a month after she disappeared. They are the worst. So, well, in this situation, they were definitely the worst. They offered up no proof whatsoever that she was in the Edmonton area and only said that one man had seen her at a gas station, like I said, which was obviously not even true, as we'll hear, as you already know. So at one point, the RCMP sent Amber's mother, Tootsie, an email. They were asking her to identify Amber's belongings that had been in her suitcase at the motel via email. It wasn't in person. They didn't ask her to come. They didn't go take her. I don't know if you can take evidence to a person, but they asked her through email and some shitty pictures to identify her belongings. And her mother found that to be extremely weird and was wondering, why are you not asking me in person? Why can't I look at these in person? So it was after this that they sent her this email that somebody in the RCMP, who they are all I don't know who it was this person, threw her belongings away. All the belongings that were left at the hotel were completely thrown away. Okay, so according to her family, they're really suspicious of this woman that she was at the motel with, and she goes missing essentially from the motel, and then the person that she's with is kind of just whatever, and then they don't even collect her belongings to keep as evidence, test for anything or whatever. Like, they just throw it away. I find that to be bizarre. But it happened. And, cool. This left nothing physically to be investigated regarding what she had with her. So no physical evidence whatsoever to be investigated. And when we're talking about how suspicious this friend of hers was being, I find that to be pretty horrifying. Regarding the destroying of her belongings and the statement that was made to the public that she was alive and well, the spokesperson for the RCMP stated that it was not the best practice and it was something that they should not have done. It should not have happened, but it did. Okay, yeah, I guess, obviously. As one would expect, Tootsie was confused, she was devastated, and she was left to fight for Amber to be placed back on the missing persons list for the next 2 years. So that's really amazing. Then, in early 2012, the RCMP told Amber's family that they suddenly believed her to be deceased and that she had met with foul play after 2 years of claiming she had just abandoned her child. They recommended that they have a memorial for her, but they did not reveal what information they had to give them the impression that she had been dead. They told the family that they knew she was dead, but that they wanted them to continue to post on Facebook and otherwise as though Amber were still missing, which is very odd. I mean, I guess the only thing I can think is that they didn't want the killer to know that they knew she had been dead, even though, yeah, which I guess that's what it is at that point for some reason. Months later, in late August of 2012, the RCMP called her family into their detachment center in Fort McMurray. And once they were there, they told them that they had an audio recording of Amber the night that she went missing, and they played it for them. This recording was 17 minutes long, and the family stated that in that 17 minutes, there were pieces that were beeped out that had obviously been edited to conceal some information on the tape. When her family asked how long they had had the recording, they claimed that they were told that the RCMP had had it for a year. So I find that to be bizarre because, as we'll hear in a second, that call does not in any way make you have the impression that something great was happening or even remotely good was happening with Amber in that call. She sounds like she's terrified and that this man is taking her somewhere she doesn't want to go. So I don't know why they continue to let the public think that she had just run off and that she, hadn't met foul play, but they did. And so then they released this audio clip to the public, and they did it as a call for help in identifying the man in the tape who had picked her up in his car. It was the first time ever that the RCMP released an audio recording in a homicide investigation to the public. So what they released was about 61 seconds of audio. It was from a 17-minute call that she had had with her brother, who was incarcerated at the time at the Edmonton Remand Center, from her phone on the night that she vanished. Now, I have read in a lot of stories that he had called her, and then I think what I read in the hearing that her brother Paul had, that she had actually called her brother. And I don't know if the man in the car knew that she had the phone on or not. I think maybe, as you'll hear in a minute, he might have realized it later on, because that's a long call. And anyway, okay, so the entirety of the call has never been released. It is not known when the RCMP came into the possession of the audio exactly and how they did, but they did. So in the call, you can hear both Amber and the man who abducted her. And I'm going to call the play. I'm going to play the call now, and I will discuss it with you following that.
Where are we by?
We're just heading south of Beaumont, or north of Beaumont.
We're heading north of Beaumont. Yo, where are we going?
Just
No, this is a... Are you fucking kidding me? You better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city. Jeez. Yo, we're not going into the city, are we?
We're going.
No, we're not.
Yes.
Then where the fuck are these roads going to?
50th Street.
50th Street. Are you sure?
Absolutely.
Yo, where are we going?
50th Street.
50th Street?
50th Street.
East, right?
East.
Over town.
Travel.
Bye.
So, it's pretty disturbing for sure. Where are we by? Says Amber. We're just heading south of Beaumont or north of Beaumont. You can see there that he accidentally gave himself away, that he didn't actually take her where she wanted to go, and then he corrected himself to say that they were going north. She says, you better not be taking me anywhere I don't want to go. I want to go into the city, okay? And you can tell she's starting to get a little worried. She keeps asking him where they're driving to, and the man claims that they're going to East 50th Street. Then Tuccaro appears to ask what they're driving on, and the man says gravel, and that is where the conversation ends. And it's clear to me that she is trying to give her location away to whoever she had been on the phone with. So what can we gather from the portion of the recording that they released? So she has either hitched a ride, which, I see a lot of people being really victim blaming about this. Like, why would she have hitched a ride? And I understand where you're coming from. I wouldn't hitch a ride with anybody, I wouldn't think. But also, it is said by locals that this is extremely common in the area. So it's not something that is out of the norm. And it's not something that, anybody thought too much about. Because 90% of the time or more, you're going to get a ride with some nice person that's just helping you out. And that is just what goes on here. But that, obviously, Amber that evening got in the car with somebody who it is extremely unfortunate that she got in the car with. So she also could have taken a cab. Who knows? We don't know. He was supposed to be taking her north into downtown Edmonton, and obviously she began to express concern that he's not taking her there. And like I said, he slipped up. He quickly, attempted to cover up the fact that he was actually going the opposite direction from what she wanted. You can just hear in her voice that she is afraid, but also mad. I will say that too. I mean, it's even no matter how angry you can get, it's always going to be frightening to have really nothing to defend yourself but your own body, and some creepy motherfucker has taken you in his car. I think that's never going to not be scary. So I have known about this for quite a while. Amber's case. It's been 8 years now, but it's such a disturbing phone call. I mean, it has stuck with me for years, just hearing that guy sounds calm or cool. I'm going to mix up my little sayings. Calm as a cucumber. No, cool as a cucumber. He doesn't seem in any way to be nervous. It seems like he's fairly comfortable picking women up and killing them, because, that's what happens here. It doesn't seem to me like this was a new thing for him. He wasn't even worked up in any way. So the RCMP, they released this audio as a public plea for someone who recognized the man's voice to come forward, as there has got to be family, friends, acquaintances, somebody who can identify the man from the minute-long audio clip. When her family met at the detachment center, they were told that if Amber's remains were ever found, that they would be the first to know, but that it would take up to 2 weeks to identify the remains, as they would have to go through the RCMP, then to the coroner, etc. It would take a process that's always weeks long. They said that's just how it goes. Anyway, so 4 days later, following the release of this call to the public on September 1st, 2012, horseback riders came upon a skull in a farmer's field in Leduc, which is just south of Edmonton. The skull was identified, unfortunately, as Amber Tuccaro's, and the very day that they discovered the skull, they identified her body. They said it was the only portion of her remains that were ever discovered. Now, the family and I, personally, have questions on how they identified the remains so immediately, as I don't understand why they made such a big deal about saying that they would take weeks to identify remains. And then when her skull was found, they did it through dental records that day. Now, they never took DNA and never did any DNA testing, and for some reason, Paul, her brother, says that they refused to DNA test, even though the DNA had been taken from her belongings at the hotel and from her mother's house. It's kind of just strange to me, I guess. Knowing that the family was adamant about requesting the DNA testing be done, they just didn't do it. And then the RCMP sent a medical examiner to Fort Chip to Amber's family to explain to them why they were sure that they positively identified Amber's remains through dental records that day. This was supposedly the first time that they ever sent a medical examiner out to convince a family of identification outside of the jurisdiction, I guess, where they work. So I don't know why they would do that. That definitely seems suspicious to me. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just looking for something to be suspicious about, but it seems really strange. I mean, maybe it's not, but I don't know. Okay. Anyway, due to the level of decomposition and only having partial remains, a cause of death has never been determined for Amber. According to Paul, her brother, they were told with Amber's skull that there were other remains, but they were told that they were animal remains. And I mean, the family has questions about that, but I don't really understand. It seems weird that there would be animal remains there too. According to RCMP spokesperson Mary Schlosser, the discovery of Tuccaro's remains so soon after the audio was released was entirely coincidental. Okay, maybe it was, but I know myself and I know most of you out there, and we're all going to think it's kind of suspicious. So we know the full call was 17 minutes. Whatever other information is on that call, we may never know. What we do know is that 17 minutes is just about the length of time that it takes to drive from the Miksew motel to the farmer's field where her skull was found. So the detectives believe that instead of driving Amber north toward Edmonton, the driver took rural roads heading south toward Leduc County, possibly to confuse her about where exactly that they were going, which is so terrifying. And also, I mean, I just hate this guy so much. I mean, obviously. So in September of last year, a federal police watchdog group released a 121-page report detailing what they describe as deficiencies in the investigation into Amber's disappearance, confirming her family's belief that the RCMP mishandled the case from the outset. Her family had filed a complaint in 2014 with the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission, alleging that the Leduc RCMP's delay in investigating her disappearance hindered the subsequent homicide investigation. The investigation into this was supposed to take 16 months to 2 years, but it took over 4 years for her family to receive this report from the CRCC. So this Civilian Review and Complaints Commission is an independent government agency that examines complaints of misconduct by the RCMP. And they found that the investigation by Leduc RCMP was deficient in that various members were either not properly trained or did not adhere to their training, and that various members did not comply with various policies, procedures, and guidelines. That's fairly it's a broad statement, fairly encompasses the entire investigation. So they were deficient in the entire investigation. Particularly, the decision to remove Amber from the missing persons list after she vanished was deemed erroneous and resulted in a month-long delay in investigation into her disappearance. In addition, it took the RCMP 4 months to interview Amber's mother, Tootsie, which the commission found unreasonable and unexplained. This is not like JonBenet Ramsey, where her parents were refusing to speak with detectives. Tootsie was actively trying to get them to investigate Amber's disappearance, and they didn't even interview her one time for 4 months. What the hell? The report also stated that contact information for potential witnesses was not always recorded. Holy moly, dude. So, you know what, another case that not to totally derail here, but another case that we've covered here in this podcast last year, I know that was only a few months ago, but was the Lauren Agee case that is still developing on its own, very own podcast. And they didn't record anything either. They were like, oh, we just talked to some people. We didn't write down anything in interviews or record them. We just talked to people. It's fine. Like, yeah, we'll remember everything we need to remember. Oh, my gosh, this is so pathetic. So John Ferguson, Alberta RCMP acting commanding officer, read a prepared statement at the news conference on behalf of Commissioner Brenda Lucky. The commissioner vowed to implement the recommendations, and they thanked the family for speaking up about the injustices that they'd experienced. He said, the RCMP understands the urgency and importance of missing persons cases. We must learn from our mistakes and continue to move forward with new policies and procedures. Amber's case is now in the hands of RCMP's CARE division. It's based in Edmonton, which investigates the cases of unsolved homicides and cases of vulnerable missing persons. Although they will not disclose how many cases they are currently investigating, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation Aboriginal Unit has found that there are at least 15 unsolved cases of Indigenous women who have gone missing or have been murdered in and around the Edmonton area in recent years. The partial remains of 4 of those 15 women, including Amber Tuccaro's, were found within kilometers of each other in Leduc County. So, I mean, what does that tell you? We'll talk about the other women that were found within kilometers of Amber's body. So, on April 28th, 2003, Katie Sylvia Ballantine is last seen in Edmonton, and her remains were found near Leduc on July 7th, 2003. Katie was a sex worker in the Edmonton area. And there's a high number of sex workers in this area that experience extreme abuse on a daily basis by just random men. And they're, well, maybe not so random actually, and there are a very high number of women in the sex work industry that have gone missing completely. So anyway, we'll talk about it more in a minute. In May of 2015, the remains of another Indigenous woman who had been missing since 2004, Corey Ottenbright, who was a 27-year-old woman, they were found in the rural area in Leduc County. Corey was also a sex trade worker who volunteered to give CARE's proactive street team in 2003 her DNA in the case that she went missing, which was morbid as hell because she went missing only months later. She lived in Edmonton, and she was last seen at 10 p.m. on May 9th, 2004, when she left home to go to work. She was known to work along 118th Avenue in northeast Edmonton. At the same time, the remains of another woman who had been missing, Dolores Brower, were found just alongside Corey Ottenbright's. Dolores was last seen in Edmonton in May of 2004. She was also a sex worker who gave a sample of her hair to the CARE team in the case that she went missing, and unfortunately, she did just that. Obviously, this says a lot about what's going on here. And the other thing that I was going to mention that I kind of forgot about was that Paul, Amber's brother, says that they were told that there were other remains when they found Amber's skull, but they claim that they were animal remains, and which maybe that's true, or maybe it's not. Maybe it is another woman. Who knows? I mean, surely they would have come out and said that. Or if I wanted to get real conspiracy-ish, then I would go even further, but I won't. And maybe in a little bit. So, according to a RCMP spokesperson, they are definitely considering that these women have all been murdered by the same individual. They say that they are looking for a work truck that would have hunting or camping materials in it. And according to Inspector Gibson Glavin of the RCMP, it would go against logic to say that they are not considering this the work of a serial killer. So they said that within the investigational theories that this is a very strong one. So basically, pretty sure, I mean, obviously, it would obviously have to be the case unless it's just a group of a bunch of depraved individuals. This obviously is a serial killer. In February of 2015, Tootsie traveled to Ottawa for the first ever roundtable into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. She and dozens of families across Canada met with premiers, representatives from 6 national Aboriginal organizations, and 2 federal cabinet ministers. There, she expressed her support for a federal inquiry into the issue. She believes that this could highlight gaps that exist, especially in the areas of reporting a missing person. Yes. Also, I know that her brother attended something similar where he gave testimony, and they were just pretty much imploring that people in Indigenous communities be able to have access to the information that they need in order to be able to handle these situations competently, because they are given no resources. Some may not have internet, some may not be able to read, but they're expected to be extremely proactive on their own behalf for trying to find whoever has gone missing. And it's, like he said, how are we supposed to know the processes here? It needs to be more well laid out. Like maybe we could have forms, it's like a checklist for certain periods of time that have passed, and both the families and the police have those checklists so that nobody is missing out on investigating somebody's very time-sensitive disappearance. We all know how crucial those first hours and days and weeks are. So, as far as getting witnesses and, leads and everything like that. So to let somebody be missing for months without investigating it whatsoever is unforgivable. It's unacceptable as well. And so these people anybody that has a family member who has gone missing should know clearly what they need to do and what steps they need to take in order to help their loved one come home or their case to be solved, instead of just being ignored and having to be, over the top trying to get people to investigate. Like, it shouldn't be a fight. Wouldn't we rather that we investigate cases that, may not need as much investigation versus going completely the opposite direction and not investigating a case of abduction and murder? You're not taking one case seriously is hurting your ability to solve all of these cases. So anyway, okay. So as I mentioned earlier, the town of Miksew itself is really more of an industrial area. It caters to the oil industry, and at the time of Amber's murder, this industry was thriving, and that means that there... Oh, I'm turning into a hick all of a sudden. Okay. That means that there were men that were traveling throughout the area for work, living in different cities for a few months and moving on, becoming familiar with the area, and also, but not having a permanent residence there. So it's much harder for anyone really to get to know you or people to be able to track you, etc. So this would make it a lot easier for a serial killer to get to know a certain area, select a vulnerable target, and move on without much attention being drawn to them. So that's just, in saying that, I'm just saying, there's with a very high transient population, it's going to be a lot easier for maybe a serial killer to be able to do what he does and not be caught, especially when he's targeting. And I'm not saying that Amber was in the sex trade, but if this serial killer is in a great deal targeting women out at night, I mean, all I'm saying is that that's a possibility as far as suspects and who may have done this. It's just one possibility. So there are 3 women that have come forward to the RCMP naming one man as the voice on the recording, saying that they have ridden with him numerous times. But the RCMP says that they have interviewed this man and he has been ruled out as a suspect for the murders. One of the women who came forward states that she doesn't feel that the RCMP looked into this claim very hard and that she knows the man's voice like the back of her hand. The man in question, I'm not going to name his name, but he owns a horse ranch, and there is if you research into this at all, there's a vast amount of information on this man online. I mean, it's open about people who say who this person is. But there are a ton of stories from all these different places online with people detailing creepy and sketchy behavior that they experienced from this man. So he has this horse ranch, and he kind of lures couples and individual women to this ranch for promises of work and learning a trade, which they said they actually do while they're there. One of the accounts I read, they said they learned welding, which has become incredibly useful for them now, but still, some of the other stuff is oh dear. And, caring for horses and whatnot, running the ranch. So anyway, he lures them there, and then he starts to make lewd comments. They are shown, he shows them weird fetish videos, and he'll leave his computer open playing porn in random spots that he'll spy on them in the middle of the night when they go to the bathroom, because they share a bathroom with him. And so there's a door leading from his bedroom into the bathroom. So no matter what, he's always going to be able to be there. He would take them out to recruit, and he would, stop when there would be attractive women and ask them to get out and try to recruit them to come live with them. And that he got increasingly aggressive and angry when they didn't comply. And this man also has a history of domestic abuse and some other, not so great things that make it very believable that he's a total predator ass creep who gets aggressive and perhaps violent. So The RCMP does say that they have cleared this guy, though, but it's just weird because of how many people have openly come out and accused him of this. But there are also, in some of those accounts that I read, there were also a lot of people who said that his voice didn't really match that of the unidentified man on the Amber Tuccaro audio clip. So who knows? And those people were saying he was an absolute creep, and they were afraid for their lives when they lived with him, but they don't think that he was the one on the tape. So who knows? Also, there's the possibility that there was more than one man in that car with her, and maybe we could mistake that one voice for or two voices for being one voice, or maybe one wasn't talking, and that's also possible. So something I read online, it was on Reddit, and credit to the person that wrote it because I didn't write it down, but this is just somebody, I know this isn't anything I'm like trying to report as absolute fact here, but I checked out the maps, and so this does check out, and it's just somebody speculating online, so this is nothing official. But this person said, I grew up in the Miskew area. In fact, 2 range roads over from where the body of Amber and all the other women have been found. Amber is not the only one, unfortunately. Police believe these murders are the work of a serial killer, which obviously we talked about, yes. So they continue. In between the motel, she was picked up to 50th Street. There are no perpendicular gravel roads that could connect. All roads are paved now. So he clearly took her down a parallel side road in the opposite direction. This was someone who knows the area and knows exactly where to go. This area is fairly sparsely populated, mostly small acreages and farmland. It takes about 10 minutes to get from Miskew Motel to 50th Street towards Beaumont. I drive that road 3 to 5 times a week, so if the call was 17 minutes long, I strongly believe he was backtracking and heading down random side roads to confuse or disorient her. There are times where I'm on those roads at 9 p.m. and I never see another car until I hit Beaumont, so I have very easy time believing that they could go unnoticed later in the night on the back roads. I think he drove her down Airport Road towards 50th, crossed 50th, and then turned south down RR 241. It would match the timeline. RR 241 is gravel. Ugh. So anyway, just to give you an idea, and like I said, I looked it up. I looked up on the maps. It does check out. So just an idea about what he had actually done. And, the overwhelming, I think, consensus is that he definitely was taking her in the opposite direction and was kind of winding around to confuse her. So as far as Amber's friend is concerned, the one that she traveled with, so according to her family, like I said a million times, but this girl had an ever-changing story regarding where Amber was going, and they still to this day haven't gotten a straight answer about that evening, which I find to be really odd. It's been 8 years now. Is it even more than that? No, it's been 9 years. So I just find it's really hard to believe that I can't believe they haven't gotten more of the straight story. So is this because the pair were there to do something that they did not want to share with the family? It is possible that they were there to purchase drugs or make money in some way that, that is illegal, perhaps in sex work. I don't know, but it's absolutely not substantiated by anyone or any details. It's only speculation, and I don't really know that I believe that. It does seem incredibly suspicious, though, that her friend's story was not solid from the get-go. That means that she wasn't being truthful. It doesn't take a lot to remember the truth. So what in the world would be so important that you could not tell the truth regarding your friend's disappearance and then now murder? Now, all these years later, she still hasn't told them the truth. What takes precedence over making sure that you're giving the entirety of the information that could possibly help the police solve her murder and help give her family the answers that they desperately need? Even if it was something like drugs or something stupid like that, I think at this point, her family wouldn't give a shit. They'd be like, okay, I don't care. I just want to know what happened to my freaking daughter or sister. So something weird is up with her friend, in my opinion, because I don't think there's a lot that could be more important than just giving them all the details they need. Because that's what makes me think that's not the case. Because if Amber was going to get drugs from somebody, or she was going to perform some sexual act for money or whatever, I think her friend by this point would be like, you know what, she was going to meet this guy, he called himself John, whatever. So that to me makes me think that's not what happened. And then I start to wonder what in the hell could have happened. Did this friend if she was even a friend. Did she have something? I mean, I would say at this point, it doesn't really seem like she is because she can't tell her family the truth about what happened to her. But did she have something to do with her abduction? Was there crucial evidence regarding her disappearance that was missed and possibly destroyed whenever her belongings were thrown away? Everything at the hotel. According to her brother, they interviewed this girl like once. Her story wasn't very straight, and it didn't align with what she told the family. And then they kept following up and asking if they had interviewed her more, and they would say like, "Oh, we haven't found her. She was on drugs at the time. Now she's clean, and she has nothing to do with it. It's fine." And that just seems really weird to me. So, okay. I just want to know what this chick is hiding. What is she covering up? Is it innocent? I don't think so after all this time and knowing her quote-unquote friend was murdered. I have to say her behavior seems more suspicious than innocent, absolutely. I don't know what in the heck she's covering up, but she's covering something up. I mean, at this point, do you really care if you were gonna, if you were going to have sex for money or if you were gonna go buy drugs? Do you really care? And how do you not know that is going to help give you some information into where Amber had been going and who might have picked her up? And I don't know. I just think it's really, really, really shady. So Amber's family is obviously suspicious of this bitch, and they're also suspicious of the events that are laid out by the RCMP. They're dubious about the fact that they had that audio for over a year before telling them, which I give them that for sure. And the fact that they dismissed her case at the outset, that means they were missing key opportunities to investigate witnesses and collect evidence, like I said. They're also dubious about the fact that they released the audio and then 4 days later discovered her remains and then were able to identify them that very same day through dental records, even though they were told only months earlier that it would take weeks to identify her remains if they were found. So it's all of it is just super coincidental. And like I said in last episode, I'm like, there's a freaking saying that cops have about coincidences, about how they don't exist. Anyway, there's no such thing as a coincidence. This is too many right here. I'll tell you that. Okay, so her family says that they have explicitly requested DNA testing over and over. They have been denied. I don't know why that would be either. And they have also discussed exhuming Amber's remains because of this. So this is legally possible, but within their culture, it is something that is just not done. So this has caused them to hold off on doing so unless it's absolutely necessary and they have a good plan in place, because it's not something that's done. But so I'm wondering, is her family not even sure that's her actual remains, or what exactly? I guess that's what's going on here. So what happened to Amber Tuccaro is the question. Obviously, she was the target of a predator who abducted her under the guise of giving her a ride, whether that was a cab ride or a hitchhiking ride, I don't know. And like I said earlier, I absolutely want to throw up when I always see it's such a knee-jerk reaction for people to be like, why would she ever get in a car with somebody else? Why would you do that? I get it. I get where you're coming from, but take a second, take a deep breath, and understand the context of the situation before you freak out and start just trying to blame somebody for being murdered by a serial killer, okay? Anyway, she, expected to be taken to a certain spot, and she was not. Whatever she was going to do there, whether it was meeting a friend, whether it was buying drugs, whether it was, that's it. I mean, who really cares, because it didn't happen in the first place. And, whatever she was going to do, it didn't deserve being abducted and murdered. So it doesn't really matter, does it? So, it might help to know where she had been when she got picked up exactly. But regardless, somebody intervened and killed her. So what is the reason that the RCMP, why did they do such a terrible job? They openly admit it. Now, Paul says they have never apologized to the family, but they do say that they have, changed their practices and whatnot since this happened. But is it just merely negligence? Is it discrimination? Is it something more nefarious? I'm not really sure about the RCMP. I would like to think that there was it was a major, major fuck up, and that, things like this our learning experience that unfortunately happened. Obviously, it would be really awesome if a learning experience didn't have to come at the cost of an unsolved murder of a 20-year-old mother. But yeah, so I don't think with the history that we have in both Canada and the United States that I don't know that it's that innocent. I think that there's probably discrimination here, and that sucks, and I really hope that there's some changing that goes on. But I don't say that changing. I do think that there is going to be a kind of counterbalance of awareness of the issue of people that do actually give a shit about the fact that there are thousands and thousands of women that have gone missing by who knows who. A lot of them, you know, I'm sure not all of these women are missing because of a serial killer, but there's a lot of them that are. Obviously, at least in this scenario, we have 5 women who have gone missing and their bodies have been found in this exact spot. So, you know, there's obviously a serial killer out there targeting women in the sex industry and perhaps just women alone at night. You know, it doesn't have to mean that Amber was doing anything, not that it makes her any more worthy of being a victim or not, and it's absolutely irrelevant what she was going to do, but she didn't have to be doing anything illegal to be out at night and be vulnerable in that way, you know, unfortunately, because if you have some creep who picks you up and has child locks on and gets you locked in his car because he tells you he's going to take you to downtown Edmonton, which is 10 minutes away, and then he decides to take all these windy roads to confuse you on where you're going until you are in the middle of nowhere and he can kill you. So it doesn't really matter what you were going to do in the first place. This is absolutely happening. So some man is picking up women and killing them and dumping them and hoping that nobody cares enough for him to ever get caught. And unfortunately, so far that's the case because they really bungled this investigation in the early stages. And, you know, the other aspect I was thinking about that is maybe this man who 3 women have claimed is the voice they know, the horse ranch guy, maybe he is their suspect, but they're trying to keep it more under wraps because they need absolute 100% whatever to go after him and it not be in vain. So, I mean, maybe this guy is the guy, but regardless, it's so unlikely to me that the man on that tape hasn't a person out there in the world that could be like, hey, I know that voice. So whether that means that the right people just haven't heard that yet, or if that means that there's someone out there that is concealing this information to save his ass, I don't know. But somebody out there knows the voice on the tape with Amber, and that is the man who killed her. And if you have any type of goodness within you at all, you would do the right thing, call the police, or I guess the RCMP. I hope they can be trusted to take this information and tell what you know, because obviously the man that's on that tape with Amber, that's not the first time he killed somebody, and it's not going to be the last time he killed somebody. So it's going to happen again. It's already happened multiple times, and that is terrifying. So we're here. We're going to keep looking into it. Hopefully, in some way, there's going to be some progress made in finding out who this piece of garbage is. As it stands, I'm here to just say that, you know, Amber Tuccaro, hopefully her family will receive the justice that they so badly want and deserve, and so does she. But for now, that is all I have on Amber Tuccaro and the very first murdered and missing Indigenous women coverage that we are doing for Keep It Real this year. So thank you very much for listening. I am so excited to finally be covering this topic, though, like I said, it's pretty rough, and so we'll be covering another one next month. And it's, you know, first episode of the year. I know it's kind of a little bit of a bummer that I'm by myself, but it happened, and I think that this case was info-packed enough that you got your fair share out of it. So anyway, I don't even know what fair share of entertainment. So anyway, Okay, we love ya. I know I say that a lot, but I have a lot of really cool things in store this season. I know that, like, my husband thinks it's funny that I'm calling them separate seasons, but, it is what it is. I want to. So I have a lot of really cool things developing, collaborations with some people. You know that we have our Facebook group. We're trying to keep that going, get it going more. It's the Creep It Real podcast hangout. Of course, come just like the page at Creep It Real podcast on Facebook, and our Instagram is Creep It Real Pod. We're on Twitter. We're on Twitter at Creep It Real Pod. That one I'm not that great with, but of course you can email whenever you feel like telling us anything or sharing cases, possibilities like that, things like that. Words of encouragement. If you need my address to mail me love letters, like the love cross stitch that we got recently from Stitches of Anarchy, which is badass. Hello, my friend who sent the coolest cross stitch thing ever. You can see that on our Instagram. It's awesome. All the way from the UK. And anyway, so there's that. And let's see what else there is. Oh, of course, there's our Patreon. It's Creep It Real Pod. We're about to start posting up in there. We have a really exclusive interview with a woman that was raised in the Children of God cult that's going up in a couple days. And we just have like little, we have special episodes that we post there. Little giveaways that are exclusive. You get stuff if you join and donate in the first place, and then there's like extra giveaways, and then you'll have the opportunity to contribute for like what topics that we cover. But anyway, there's that. Of course, there's our merchandise on Shopify. If you go to our Instagram page, the link for our Shopify is right there. And we have pretty cool stuff. I've gotten myself a hoodie. I got a baseball shirt. I'm going to get something else soon. I freaking love them. I wear them all the time. And they're soft and delightful. Big time. Surprisingly so. So anyway, I think that's it. So thank you so much for listening. Shy will be back for the next episode, and we'll be back to normal post-holiday horrifying nightmare. Not really. I love Christmas, whatever. I just love the holidays. But I will say that like the older I've gotten, the more it's just stressful. It's like, you're either like shuttling around from house to house with all these people having expectations of you, and it's overwhelming. And you're like, can I just sit back and enjoy the fucking holidays? And then it's like, no, you're an adult now. It's not fun anymore. It's not just about getting presents. And to be quite honest with you, I don't really care about getting presents. I love giving presents, and so that part to me is really great. I like did crafting I haven't done in years for this Christmas, but God, it's just so much obligation and pressure. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to the day that I live up on a mountain, and if you want to come see me, if you want to spend the holidays with me, you can come to my house, but otherwise, like, I'll see you guys later. I'm living on my mountain. So with that, I will leave you here. I love you. Creep it real. Bye.
Check out the Murderific True Crime Podcast, hosted by Bernadette from the state of Maine. Topics will include some seriously true scary stories about serial killers, mass murderers, familicides, the missing, and unsolved cases. Go to www.murderific.com to start listening now, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Until then, we will be executing podcasts one crime at a time.